You are welcome. My name is Khalaf, and I am delighted to be your host for today's session. We are excited to welcome you in this webinar about international financial reporting for nonprofit organizations project and how it is relevant for stakeholders in Syria. Much as primary audience is stakeholders in Syria, I know that we have had registrations from other countries, so you are all welcome. This meeting, in this meeting, we will introduce international financial reporting for nonprofit organization project before opening up for some small groups discussions and feedback. We will then look at how we as stakeholders in Syria and point can involve it and play our part in shaping the future of financial reporting in nonprofit organizations, so that our needs and perspectives are reflected. As I said, I'm Khalaf, and as a project country champion, I'm your host today. I'm excited about the International Financial Reporting for Nonprofit Organization project because an agreement on globally accepted accounting standard for NPOs will save a lot of time, a lot of efforts for the organizations and donors too, which will lead us to increase the effectiveness of non-profit organizations around the world. And I was surprised to discover that there was no sector equivalent to reporting standard in the non-profit sector, because my experience in the insurance sector, and there was standard 17 for contract insurance, and I surprised that there was no standard for non-profit organizations. I am delighted to be joined by the project director, Samantha Museki. Sam, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you so much, Khalaf. I will introduce myself properly later when I have the microphone and my words can come up in Arabic. But suffice it to say, I'm really delighted to be with you today.
Okay. I'm glad to welcome and recognize the presence of who have registered to be here with us today. It's great to see so many of you here. Please take a moment to introduce yourself by typing in the chat, and you are welcome, and thanks in advance. I will talk about the non-profit organization and the humanitarian sector in Syria. Before Sam gives us an overview of the project, I would like to give you a summary of the non-profit organization sector in Syria by way of context. There are more than 45 international non-profit organizations In addition to hundreds of local associations, they are working to meet basic needs of people in need afforded by the conflict in Syria since 2011. The presence of these organizations improves to access to water and food for more than 9 million people afforded in Syria. And the number of the employees of these organizations and associations exceeds 10,000. Syria is divided, unfortunately, Syria is divided into three administrative authorities, which makes for a quite of complex regularity environment. The first one is some organizations operate in the government area in Syria, and this organizations take tutories and are subject of to Syrian regulation and laws governing in all fields, like Syrian labor law and basic monetary law, and all laws issued by Ministry of Social Efforts and Labor. The second one, some organization is operate in area of autonomous administrative in northeast Syria, and they, according to memorandum of understanding with this autonomous administration, and according to laws issued by the humanitarian organization A-Force office in northeast Syria. And the last one, some organization operate in the northwestern Syria, where access these areas in through Turkey. So Turkish laws perceived to be applied. In general, this above mentioned authorities do not enforce any special laws for non-profit organization work. The primary focus of non-profit organizations in Syria is compliance with donors requirements, where each project has template and special reports, and it's different from the rest of the project or program. You know, from donor and another donor, it's different. A big difference between it. The complexity of reporting requirements affects them greatly and needs great effort to be able to understand and apply the requirements of each donors separately. So that is very brief overview of the situation in Syria, which I hope will provide useful context for the rest of the meeting. I would like to invite Sam to tell us about international financial reporting for non-profit organization project. We will need to change over the screen sharing, and we with you, Sam, please.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Khalaf. Now, let me just find, I'm struggling now with my different screens. I thought I had everything perfectly organized and it's all disappeared. But let me introduce myself. Hopefully you can see my words coming up in Arabic, which is the idea. So I am the project director for Humentum. I am from England. I'm a British chartered accountant, but I've been living in Uganda for the last 21 years, working in the nonprofit sector. And I've been the project director for this project since 2019. We're really, really excited to have all of you here today. This project really can only work if we have the input from experts in Syria and the region, and input to reflect the realities on the ground, and also input from experts who understand the context and understand the sector in your region. So really excited to hear what you have to share with us today, as well as what we can share with you about the project. So the next few slides are a bit of an introduction to what the project is about, what it's trying to achieve, and then we will break into small groups and hear from you. So the problem, what are we actually trying to solve here as a problem? What is the issue? So the things that I'm going to mention on this slide are not all the problems, and obviously every NPO will experience something slightly different. But in general, funders tell us that they don't find the audited financial statements, the general purpose organizational financial statements, especially useful for due diligence. This means that every funder has its own due diligence processes, and we end up with some high costs, both for grantors and grantees. And some organizations are not able to prove their eligibility. Especially in the US, there's something called equivalency determination. You have to be able to show that you are a registered nonprofit to get unrestricted funding. And sometimes that's not easy given the regulatory environments in different countries. That kind of links onto a common problem experienced by NPOs. One of the challenges that we hear is about lots of restricted project funding rather than general unrestricted funding. Some of that is linked to donor requirements and their back donors. Some of it's to do with trust. But the net effect is that many NPOs have general reserves, buffers for when they're experiencing problems, reporting requirements and audits based on all these different project and donor requirements. Now, auditors are another important stakeholder here, and in countries where there's no national standard, auditors often say they've got no framework to quote. You know, when they give an opinion, in our opinion, these financial statements give a true and fair view, they're supposed to quote a recognized framework, but there's not a framework to quote. So we end up with inconsistency, both within countries and between countries. And likewise, when auditors are focused on a given project audit rather than the entity as a whole, it makes double funding fraud particularly hard to spot. And that's a key concern for funders and feeds into the trust challenge. And then finally, if we look at regulators and society as a whole, again, this varies by country, but often general purpose accounts aren't filed or published, which leads to a sort of lack of information and transparency. That in return doesn't help create an environment of trust that would help domestic philanthropy. So again, we have even more dependence on money from other countries. And it also doesn't create a good environment where tax exemption can thrive. So what we have really here is an equity problem, because those countries that do have national standards are able to have effective regulation and tax exemption and all these things. And those countries that don't suffer these problems more heavily. So it's really an equity problem at its heart. Now, these problems have many roots, but one common factor is that there's no international accounting standard for non-profit organizations. I hope that resonates with you. So in summary, the problem statement, lack of access to non-profit reporting standards contributes to inequity in NPO income and financial health. So what's our theory of change? We believe that wide adoption of an internationally applicable accounting standard for NPOs will create an environment where NPOs have more equitable access to income and financial health. It's a flip side of the problem statement. So what are we doing? In terms of the activities of what we're doing, we are making sure that the guidance development process has diverse input from advisory groups and focus groups. And we are doing a lot of outreach activities like these country awareness events. We have country champions like Khalaf Khalaf website and media to make sure that we engage people from all over the world. the big output of the project is going to be this guidance, which is going to be called Non-Profit Accounting Guidance, or INPAG. And we're planning to issue that in 2025 in 4 languages, including Arabic. We hope that it will have endorsement by the IASB, that's the International Accounting Standards Board, and that major donors will also recognize it as best practice for non-profit reporting. And we're also looking to set up national adoption task forces so that for those countries that are looking to adopt it at country level, they can put that relevant regulations in place and the training, etc. In terms of the outcomes, that will enable, this is long term, right? Sort of 2030, whatever, some years in the future, but we could see NPOs preparing financial statements that are compliant with INPAG. We could see audits providing better assurance with a reduced risk of fraud. We could see harmonized financial reports, which are more useful and credible. And donors might reduce their reliance on project level financial reporting and audits. The impact of that is effectively a more equitable environment. NPOs better able to justify their core costs, the overheads and administrative costs that are so necessary to build program activities on top of, which can improve reliance, and more NPOs accountable, more accountable and more trusted because of this reporting environment. So that's what we're hoping to achieve in the longer term. Now, it's really important to note that we've talked about donors. The focus for this project, the focus of the guidance that we're producing is on general purpose financial statements, not on donor reports. However, we hope that as a byproduct, this might be a route to donor reporting harmonization. How? So in the INPAG guidance, we're looking to provide guidance for an optional supplementary donor or project statements, which could be added like notes, if you like, or supplementary statements in the financial statements in a standard format. It would be optional and supplementary because if an organization doesn't want to do it and it wouldn't reduce their reporting burden, then they don't have to. But if they want to, they can. So if it's helpful, then it can reduce reporting burden, but it's optional so that it doesn't increase reporting burden. Now, in terms of donors, they can choose to rely on that statement if they wanted for the financial report and financial assurance. You probably still need to do periodic reports for cash flow management and release of funds and things like that. But in terms of general audit assurance, they could rely on that statement. It means that auditors can better reconcile between the donor funds and the accounts as a whole. Auditors might also, other funders might choose to align their own format to this format in the INPAG guidance, which could lead to more convergence and less variety in reporting formats. Or of course, donors could keep requiring their own formats and keep doing their own thing. As a project, we have no authority to require any jurisdiction to adopt the guidance or to require any funder to use it or endorse it. But really, by providing something that has huge credibility and has input from stakeholders all over the world, we're creating a focal point for that energy and a focal point for that conversation. So as we move to the, you'll notice when I share the objectives on the next slide, that there is no mention of, there's no mention of a funder harmonization, funder reporting harmonization on the objectives. It's just general purpose financial statements. So this would be more of a welcome byproduct than a the primary purpose of the project. So thank you for bearing with me. Project objectives. So there are 3 stated objectives of the project. The first is to improve the quality, transparency, and credibility of the NPO financial reports. Second is to support the provision of NPO financial information that is useful for users in decision-making and accountability. And also, importantly, balancing the needs of preparers and the burden to preparers versus users and the type of information that they want. And then the third objective is about addressing NPO specific issues. Sometimes people would say, well, we can use IFRS, but there are issues that are unique to NPOs that aren't addressed in some of the other standards. And that's what we want to focus on. We don't want to rewrite rules where they're the same. We want to have as much consistency between for-profits and non-profits where there are similar transactions, but we want to focus on those areas where there are special and unique transactions and situations for non-profits. So you'll notice, again, nothing about donor reporting in these objectives. That would be a byproduct. So that's what we are out to do. So we've spoken quite a bit now. I want to do a quick poll and see, do a quick check-in to see if these issues resonate with you. So I'm going to launch the poll. Hopefully you can see that on your screens. Do these issues and objectives, so the problems that we've talked about, the theory of change, do these resonate with you? Yes, greatly, yes, but I have questions to some extent, or not really. You can just give us that feedback, that would be really helpful. See, 8 of you have responded. Yeah, make a couple more. Great. So I'll just end the poll and share the results with you there. So hopefully you can all see that. So 63% yes, greatly, 38% to some extent. So at least most of you are seeing some familiarity in these issues. So that's a good temperature check there. Now, quite often, not in this case, nobody said I have questions, but quite often people say, yes, but these ideas bring in so many questions. So we're going to structure the next few slides around these questions here that people often ask. Who is delivering the project? How is the guidance being developed? And which size of NPOs is it intended for? So the project is being delivered by Humentum and SIPFA. Is a global nonprofit building and supporting operating models that create equity, resilience, and accountability. And SIPFA is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. They're a professional accountancy organization that's had experience setting standards in the UK and for governments internationally. So between us, we have the connections needed among the standard setting community and the accounting and audit community, as well as nonprofits and funders, to be able to make this happen. We're both nonprofit organizations ourselves, so this really is a sort of by the sector, for the sector initiative. I should mention that the International Accounting Standards Board did consider whether to do a nonprofit standard in 2015, and they decided that it was necessary, but they didn't have the mandate or the resources to do it. As you'll see, they are supportive of what we're doing, but we're doing this as non-profits in the sector solving a problem that needs solving. We have funding from a few American foundations, but they don't have influence over the guidance itself. They're funding the development process. Now, the team itself is very small, but we rely on an army of amazing volunteers. This is the technical advisory group, which is made up of accounting standard setters in different countries from 5 continents. And the IASB sit as official observers on this group. They contribute, they're listening to everything that's happening, and they're making sure that we are following excellent standard setting practice. Then we also have a practitioner advisory group, which is made up of everyone relevant other than standard setters, so non-profits, auditors, academics, donors, and regulators. And this group serves as a kind of reality check. Are the standards being proposed actually going to work? Are they going to be user-friendly and practical in our different contexts? And again, this is very international, multi-stakeholder, and we're always looking to increase it and maintain diversity in these groups. Now, these 2 advisory groups are really a sort of microcosm, a micro version of the full range of stakeholders that we're trying to engage with. So if we look at, say, the bottom row here, and you imagine Syria, We could think of the different government bodies that are regulating NPOs, which is complicated in Syria with your different jurisdictions and different level of authority that they have. The Syria Accounting Institute, I'm not sure if there is one or how active it is, but many countries have an accounting institute or more that would often advise government on issues to do with accounting standards. Then you'd have local audit firms or the local offices of international network audit firms. Of course, you've got the NPOs themselves as the preparers of these financial statements, and the users, who's reading them other than the regulators. Maybe it's funders, and we really mustn't always get left out, the beneficiaries or the communities or the societies that should be benefiting from the work of the NPOs. There ought to be accountability and transparency to them as well. And of course, we have all these different stakeholders at national level, and sometimes there are regional and international bodies that they link up with as well. So this is really the key stakeholder groups that we're looking to engage with. Now, Khalaf mentioned at the beginning that donors are in Syria and elsewhere a key driver of financial reporting practice at present, because there's no international standard. Each one of them wants to make sure that there's accountability and transparency over the funds that they give. And often they're required by their back donors, right? The taxpayers or the other donors that have given them money. So their input and endorsement is really, really important. So for that reason, we've set up a donor reference group. You can see some of the members here, but still growing. We've had, I think, 3 meetings so far. And we do a report out from each of those meetings, which is shared on the website. And on the advisory groups, the meetings are fully transparent. They're recorded and minutes are taken, and they're also on the website. So nothing is done in secret. We're just trying to engage with as many people as possible. So how are we doing? Well, you can see in terms of where our members are, the tag and PAG, those yellow and maroon. We have country champions like Khalaf in lots of different countries, and the donor reference group members are also well spread out. 160 people in 160 countries are interested, and we've just picked the 10,000 mark. So long way to go, but still the general level of interest and engagement is really encouraging. So the next question is really, how is this being developed? So we're developing the guidance in a 3-phase process, which is equivalent to all other international accounting standards. So the first stage was a consultation paper, 280 pages, that we published in January last year. And we put that out for input from stakeholders around the world. And we published the results of those findings in January this year. So we're now in phase 2, which is actually using that feedback from the consultation paper to draft actual guidance for public comment. And we're going to be issuing that in 3 tranches, first in November, 18th of November this year. Then the feedback from those exposure drafts will go into forming the final guidance, which we're looking to publish in April 2025. But really, producing the guidance is actually the beginning, not the end, because it's only when the guidance is published that then we can look at training and transition and adoption and really reap the benefits that we talked about and we've been dreaming about, we can realize. So it is quite a long-term project. As they say, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. Next best is to start now. So we started the project and we're looking forward to realizing the benefits in years to come. So that's really why we've got two arms to the project design. The first is the technical rigor with SIPFA and the advisory groups and the standard setters and the IASB, real technical credibility in what's happening. And we've also got this very broad, proactive, deliberate stakeholder engagement with people like you all over the world to make sure that we can get input and awareness from all over the world. So another question is, which issues are being addressed? And I won't go into very much detail here, but these were the main sort of chapter headings in the consultation paper. And these are some of the issues that are specific to NPOs that need to be addressed. So how do you define an NPO? It's not just NGOs. There might be other non-profit organizations that aren't NGOs. Who are the users and what are their information needs? So if we think of companies, it's investors and they want return on investment and earnings per share and all these sorts of things. Well, this is just not relevant. So what are the key numbers? What are the key ratios? What are the things that users in the non-profit sector would be looking for? And what are some of the pervasive concepts and principles, therefore, that need to be edited from the for-profit paradigm to make them relevant to us? And when it comes to specific technical accounting issues, here's a long list. I won't go into them, but for example, number 3, non-exchange revenue. This is grants and donations, donations in kind, restricted grants, this sort of thing. How do we recognize those? When do we recognize it as income? What do we need to defer as unspent? What do we need to maybe disclose but not recognize? Things like that. That's a really hot topic in our sector and it's not addressed in other standards. Another one here would be number 7, financial statement presentation. Do we want to show, for example, restricted and unrestricted funds separately on the face of the income statement? And a number of other questions, but the overall shape of the financial statements and how they would look. Foreign exchange transactions, I know, has been a really hot topic and something that NPOs really struggle with if they have to present their expenditure reports in a currency that's not their ledger currency. And you end up with gains and losses because of budget rates and donor requirements on rates to use. And how do you show those gains and losses? And then crucially here, number 11, narrative reporting. We're looking to have a narrative report that accompanies the main financial statements, which would give information about who the organization is, their registration if necessary, their mission and vision and what they've set out to achieve and what they've achieved. Obviously, it's hard to get a lot of consistency or in that, given that the sector is so broad, but we've been working hard to develop something that we think can be broadly applicable and really useful, and really supplement and add value to the general purpose reports as a whole. So what would the guidance actually look like? We're starting with the, by the way, if this includes lots of words that you don't know, don't worry if you're not an accountant, but if you are, maybe you'll know some of these terms. So the IFRS for small and medium enterprises is a short standard, it's 250 pages, 24 sections, and we'll be using this as a starting point, but it's written for for-profit businesses. So we'll need to add or replace or modify some sections that are going to be relevant for our sector. And to do that, we will use full IFRS if needed, IPSAS where it's relevant. There's quite a lot from IPSAS, which is the government standards, the international public sector accounting standards, and also some of the 12 or so countries that have got national standards. We don't want to reinvent whole wheels if we don't need to. So we'll draw on this to fill the gaps and make changes as needed. We can remove whole sections that just aren't relevant. And then what we'll end up is INPAG in a similar structure with the 24 plus or minus sections, a one-stop shop booklet that should enable nonprofits and auditors to know all their reporting requirements. So I think this might be my last slide. Who's this for? And this is this has been quite a contentious question and a difficult one. IFRS for SME is an accrual-based standard, and there are many NPOs that need to have information about their assets and liabilities to be able to run their organizations well and be fully accountable and transparent. But we also recognize that there are large numbers of micro NPOs where the benefits of accrual accounting might be outweighed by the costs. No, the other way around, that the costs might be bigger than the benefits. They have simpler accountability needs, and cash reporting might be sufficient to meet those needs in micro organizations. So we're not aiming to meet the needs of those micro NPOs in what we're calling tier 3. There might also be very complex organizations or those that get loans on public debt, or raise money from a public exchange. I know they're trying to start something like that in India, or take the money of beneficiaries on trust. They might have more complex and onerous reporting needs, but pretty small number of them, I would say, globally, and they might need other standards. What INPAG is aiming for is this middle tier. The vast majority of small, medium, and probably even large NPOs that need to track their assets and liabilities and need to be accountable to their stakeholders. But they are, what's the word, very deliberately not defining these tiers in any very tight way. And obviously it's up to each jurisdiction to decide which NPOs in their jurisdiction should be allowed to or required to use INPAG. Likewise, we would be encouraging donors to endorse it, to encourage it where it's allowed, but not to be conflicting with any requirements of national regulators, because that again could just increase burden rather than solving it. So with that, I hope that's been a whistle-stop tour of introduction to the project. So let me hand back to Khalaf, who's going to take us through the small groups. Can I hand back to you, Khalaf? I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Sam, for this comprehensive and great information about nonprofit organization project. Thank you so much. I will share my screen and continue. Just a minute, please. Having that introduction about the project, now is the chance to meet some of the other people here and share your reaction and your questions in smaller groups. We will be using breakout rooms that some will launch it soon. Once the rooms are launched, we will be taking a new meeting room with 8 to 10 people for 12 minutes. It will work best if you are able to have your videos and your microphones for the small group chats. If you have any problems, you can fresh to ask host question. When there are 3 minutes left, we will post a message to tell you. Then with 1 minute left, we will close the breakout rooms and come back automatically to the main meeting. What do you want you to actually talk about in these rooms? After brief introductions, share any questions or comment that have come to your mind, and then discuss the benefits. How might NPOs, regulators, auditors, donors in Syria benefit from guidelines, and also what challenges do you see and how might they be overcome? When it is time is up, we will automatically be right back to the main meeting, and spokespersons will have a chance to share some of this key ideas shared in your group. Does anyone have any questions before lunch to break out rooms? Any question, any comment? We have a question from
Hello.
Amr Al-Mardini. Yes, yes, please.
Thank you for this fine presentation about this important topic. Just I have an introduction and a question about IPSIS because
Amer,
yes.
just before you go on, this is exactly the type of question to put in your small groups. Do you have any questions about the small groups? If not, we'll launch the small groups, and then in those groups, please share your, introduce yourselves and exactly that kind of question about IPSAS or whatever.
Go ahead. Okay.
Share that in the small group. Is that okay?
Okay.
Brilliant. Okay. Anybody else have any questions about the groups and the setup going into the small groups? Okay, if you can unmic and put your video on, it will really help you have nicer conversations in those rooms. Otherwise, I shall open the rooms now. Khalaf, could you leave the small group and come back? I have to send you there, but it'd be good if you could come back to the main room, if that's all right. Okay, I'll open now.
Okay.
See you in 12 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some good conversations in those small groups. So now we've got a moment to share some of those questions and comments here. So if you have something that came from your group that you want to share, just use the raise hand function. Go to reactions and you can raise your hand like that. And that means we know you want to come in and you can share your comment or your question or your reaction. Amer, brilliant. Do you want to come in?
Hi, Sam.
Hi, fire away.
Hi, how are you? Just what I share with my colleague in the breaking out room is there is that my thesis statement in my master is about adopting IPSIS in the NPOs in Damascus. So the problem is, which I make so many research, and I have some questions. I think it's notes or questions or remarks that's well helpful for your sake. First is why we are talking about SMEs or IFRS standards while we have IPSIS, because all UN organizations starts, I think, from 2009 to start adopting IPSIS in their organizations, and they have a framework about this. So the main problem is why we are adopting MPOs, because many MPOs or the MPOs internationally or the local MPOs have projects with this UN agencies. So there is a need to link this reporting to be the same. This is first. Second, there is many studies about governance, talk about when we are adopting or implementing IPSIS or any standards, that we are make a governance body in the MPOs, which is useful and helpful for accountability, transparency, and other things like this. This is the first. The second is about.
Can I just ask, Amer, do you mean a governance body for each specific NPO or a governance body? Yes, so each NPO should have a governing body.
Yes, because if you are going for example, in Syria, the problem is when I read the law of this national entities or this charities, we call charities, the problem is there is no financial body inside it, which we are can call about it to be transparent or have accountability or a governance. This is an obstacle for any donor to give money. So we are, for example, there is Annex 3 for WHO to work with any MPOs there is this annex, they must fill it, which include they should have a financial body, they should have فصل سلطات بين what should we call it, the dissertation or sorry,
segregation of duties.
this segregation of duties, yes. There is must have this all to be to be considered, and then we raise it to donor. The donor will have approve on this organization to be funded. This is the problem. The problem is how they are implement this standards, and this standards needs qualified but qualified people, need governance, you know, all these problems. So we are not speaking just about standards.
Yeah.
It's like a package.
Yeah.
This first. The second concern is we need to adopt the outcomes of this standards, which is the financial statements, to be adopted with a program management environment. For example, we don't have cash flow, we don't have income statement or balance sheet. This is not works for these NPOs. We need to have, for example, encumbrances report of or money available for fund to be funded or to be implemented. This is what for me, this is what the project manager, which we have it here, it's doctors. This information they ask for it from me, and this is the information I provide, and this is the same information we needed for reporting to donors. Great. We need the implementation rate. We need the return fund, how much. We need the, yes.
Can I speak to some of those questions, Amir?
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Those are just brilliant things. So the things I've heard is one about IPSAS and UN, two about governance and the more broad thing, and third about project burn rates and encumbrances and a program approach rather than a general purpose approach.
Yes, exactly.
So speak to each of those. They're all brilliant points, and thank you. As somebody who's doing a master's in this very topic, I'm just delighted that you're here and really excited that you're part of this conversation. I'm not as much an expert as you in this field, so I'll give what I can, and I'm really delighted that you're part of this. So with respect to IPSAS, this was a huge part of the conversation when we were developing the consultation paper, and there's a whole chapter that's dedicated to it. So part 1, chapters 4 and 5 are dedicated to this question of which standard should we use as a starting point. IPSAS, we had some criteria. There were 5 criteria to consider, and IPSAS came top in one of the criteria, which is that it has more things that are relevant to NPO specific issues. It talks about grants and donations because governments have grants. It talks about public benefit rather than profit. So conceptually, IPSAS is much closer to NPO than for-profit world, business world. You said that many of the big non-profits like the UN, the African Union, and obviously you're not in Africa, but there's a number of big NPOs that do adopt IPSAS and have done so successfully. There is no need for a grantee to necessarily adopt the same standards as its grantor. I'll give you an example, USAID. When you get a grant from USAID, you have to comply with the requirements of USAID as a grantor, right? Those are totally different to what USAID itself operates on under the Federal Accounting Standards Bureau. USAID as an entity, its own reporting is governed by entirely different rules than what it requires its grantees to operate under. Same can be true for the UN. Just because the UN IPSAS doesn't necessarily mean that it requires all its grantees to use IPSAS. So those are 2 things. Let me explain why we didn't go for IPSAS as a starting point. The 2 other criteria were to do with familiarity and ease of use and editing. over time. Now, IPSAS is huge. It's about the same size as IFRS, if not bigger. It's thousands of pages. And we wanted something that was going to be easier for normal, small NPOs, not your UNs, not your African unions, your solidarities, or your everyday small, medium, and large NPO to pick up. And for that reason, IPSAS is so large. Same with full IFRS, too big, too unwieldy.
2,400 pages.
Exactly.
So
no,
far.
thank you. No, thank you. See, it's got to be practical. If it's actually going to be adopted, then it needs to be small enough that we can actually draft it and it will be manageable for a majority of NPOs to implement. I'm sure many of us in the room are aware there's a capacity gap among nonprofits. The pay is lower than the for-profit sector. You don't often get so many qualified accountants in the nonprofit sector. So we were balancing the sort of perfection of IPSAS versus the practicality of the size and its ability to be adopted. So what we're doing is starting with IFRS for SME. Now, I know IFRS for SME has SME in the title, but it's not just for SMEs. It's for any entity that hasn't got public, like a bank or a listed company. You don't have to be small and medium, you're just not listed. So any private entity of any size can actually adopt IFRS, even large. So the name of IFRS for SME is a little bit misleading. If there was an IPSAS for SME, like a small version of IPSAS, a condensed version of IPSAS, that would have been our best starting point, but it doesn't exist. So that's why we're starting with IFRS for SME and making adaptations, drawing on the guidance in for that IPSAS where relevant.
We need a new acronym.
A new what?
New acronym.
What's acronym?
Abbreviations.
Oh, a new acronym. Yes.
Acronym, yes.
We need a new acronym. So INPAG is aiming to solve for the middle. We're not aiming to solve for the tiny CBOs. We're not aiming to solve for the very, very complex tier one, but a bit similar to IFRS for SME, we're trying to provide a practical solution for a majority of NPOs that are in the middle. Now, your second question, really key about governance. Absolutely, governance is so important for NPOs. Now, in the narrative reporting section of INPAG, entities will be required to report under a heading about how they're legally established and governed. So it will be necessary for an entity to disclose what their governance situation is. Now, what we have seen in practice in the UK is that when an entity is required to disclose something, they work to improve it. So just the fact that it's disclosed means that entities will be pushed to improve their governance. But you rightly say, a financial reporting standard is not a governance standard. It won't improve governance on its own, but it's part of an environment where governance can be more easily demonstrated and scrutinized.
Exactly.
I want to move on because we've got another section of this presentation, which is equally exciting, but to your third point about program management. So we're looking to do this optional supplementary statements in the general purpose financial statements. They could speak to budget and burn rates and things like that. But generally, budgets and burn rates is for project management and not for entity-wide general purpose financial statements. Now, if you've got a standard format for how to report your actuals at project level, then you could have a standard format for preparation of budgets at project level. You can improve your burn rate and your variance reporting and everything like that. But it all starts from having a standard format, a standard list of ways that expenditures are classified. Without that, you can't standardize anything. It's a long journey that we'll have to revisit this, certainly. We're not doing that donor statement until the third tranche in November 23. So we've got some while to develop that. In the meantime, please let's keep the conversation open and keep talking about it. I'm worried about time moving, so we've only got 15 minutes, but I wonder if we can have one or two other quick comments or questions.
For me, it was exciting.
Thank you, Amir. Any other quick comments or questions? Rohat, yeah, come in.
Hello, Sam. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, let's say I agree with you that we need special standards for MPOs by adopting others. And also, I agree with you that, let's say, auditing, which depend on accounting standards, of course, is the essence of governance. Let's say the spirit of governance. So when we do the best practice or accounting standards or reporting standards, its influence, it will be on managing the whole organization, so the governance process will be more easier. Here, let's say I have a suggestions regarding that, because already we have a basement for putting this standard, which is IFRS for SMEs and or even international financial standards, and maybe even GAAP, okay, regarding America, United States, and of course, private or let's say public sector standards. But I think it will be better if we do some case studies, you know, so we'll go through an organization and let's see what's their practice and what's the best practice for them, okay, to define what's the best practice for them, because I'm sure in Syria, and actually I live in Iraq, in Erbil. I have made connections with NGOs here in Erbil. Actually, as you have mentioned, their employees are not qualified, especially in finance team. Their team is not qualified. So maybe we can define what the faults or errors or even maybe I'm talking about international MPOs, not just NGOs, not just local ones, really. So maybe if we go through them, and of course, I don't know if what we can find, but I'm sure that we'll be surprised, you know. So maybe our ideas, our opinions will be more clear if we see some, let's say, practical.
Sure.
Some practice, you know.
Yeah, Rohit,
that's all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rohit. First, I think somebody's in the waiting room. Let me let them in. That's a great. Now, let me speak to that, because yes, in an ideal world, with more time and more funding, it would be perfect to do case studies, to do pilots, to all those things. We don't have enough money or enough time to do that, unfortunately. But what we are trying to do is engage with experts such as yourself, who have got experience of those types of organizations. So rather than doing separate research, we draw on the opinions of experts who are familiar with those types of environments and organizations. Oops, somebody's very noisy. Just going to mute you there, Abdi. Thank you. So I really hope that when we issue the first exposure draft in November, please have a look at it. Please share your opinion. Please say, no, this won't work in Iraq because, or this would be better if. So that's the key aspect of this consultation, is to make sure that we get that feedback from experts without having the time or money to do full-blown case studies and research in every country of the world, which is just, the scope is too difficult and it takes too long. We've just done a big research of 90 NGOs in 10 countries. It took 2 years, and that was research about overheads and how that's, so we have done research on slightly in similar areas, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So I hope that answers that one, not necessarily the answer you were after, but that's the reality that we're facing. Khalaf, I'd like to hand back to you to finish the presentation so that we can try and close on time. If we are a few minutes late, please bear with us but listen to the next section, which is going to also be really interesting for you. Thanks, Rohat, and others. And if you've got other questions or comments and you didn't have a chance to share them, please put them in the chat. We will be monitoring that chat. I've also put a link there for where you can download the slide deck in English, and we'll also be sharing that in an email afterwards and sharing an Arabic one as well. But please don't leave, because there's more some more to come. Khalaf. Are you okay, Khalaf? I wonder if we have lost Khalaf briefly. Okay, well, in the absence of Khalaf, let me take over briefly while he sorts himself out. Oh dear. There we go. Sorry, thanks for your patience. Here we go. Khalaf, are you with us? Can you share your screen? Khalaf, are you okay? I think he's got some internet issues. It looks fit. Khalaf, can you hear us? I think I can't. Okay. See the right thing I want to share. Okay. This also isn't right, but hopefully it will get right. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. Can somebody tell me if they can see the right thing here? I hope that's okay. So just to have an idea of what's coming up and how you can engage, how as stakeholders in Syria and beyond, you can get involved. So we issued the findings from the consultation in January 2022. The next thing that's happening will be the exposure draft. This is phase 2. Now, tranche 1 of the exposure draft will be issued on the 11th of November. The feedback from these 3 tranches will then go into forming the final impact guidance in mid-2025. Now, tranche 1 in November will be covering framing issues. So things like the concepts, principles, and scope, the narrative reporting, the overview of what the financial statements will be called and what they'll look like, but not the supplementary donor statement that will be in tranche 3, and how to define a reporting entity. Now, after November, there'll be a 4-month response period. And during that period, you can view the exposure draft and the questions from, and you can submit a response from the website. There'll be videos and webinars on each of those 4 topics, and we'll be having virtual and physical regional roundtables, which will be sort of like a place to discuss some of those questions with other stakeholders. So I really hope that you will engage with that process. And if you're interested, please have a look at those different topics and the proposals. Your feedback matters, and it really does have an impact on the direction of travel. So please do that. In terms of Syria, Khalaf, are you there? I would love you to present this if you're here. If not, I will do it for you. So in Syria, it's really important that stakeholders in Syria, that you can share your opinions. As I said, there's regional consultation events. There are focus group discussions that are on our events page that you can request to have an invitation to. And of course, you can submit written responses. Now, in order to do that, you do need to understand what the proposals are. So you can visit the website, subscribe for the newsletters, and attend webinars on topics. This is more of an awareness meeting, just to let you know about it. But you can also attend webinars on specific technical topics. So if you're here, then you're welcome, basically. So individuals. Hello?
I'm so sorry, I have a bad connection.
Don't worry, Khalaf. Do you want to take over from here, or shall I continue and you can come in when you need to?
Okay, I can.
You can carry on?
Yeah,
Okay, so okay, I think he's asking me to continue. I'm not sure. So we were also really interested to have input, not just from individuals, but from organizations. So from, if you're in, I don't know, Save the Children, Syria, could submit a response rather than just an individual. That's fantastic if you can do that. If you'd like to be an organization champion and sort of coordinate a response from your organization, whether you're an NPO or a professional accountancy organization or anything, get in touch, we'll help you to do that. And might be looking to set up a Syria national working group. That would be Khalaf to organize that. So get in touch with him if that's something you'd be interested in. The goal really is to influence the impact development so that it could be relevant for users in Syria. And ultimately, maybe post 2025, it will be something that NPOs in Syria can use and adopt. But that's looking further forward. There are lots of wonderful things on the website, www.ifr4NPO.org. I'd like to just highlight 3 for you here. There's this accounting issues page, which is under the guidance development menu. Every single one of those topics has a whole web page with videos, documents that you can dig deeper into. There's also the consultation page, which is where you can find out the questions that we're putting to the public and you can submit your responses. And there's also the events page. They're all free. We're trying to do them in many languages. And you're very welcome to come. So the really big call to action, if you take away one message from today, it's take this opportunity to use your voice. This hasn't been prepared just by some donor in another country. It's very deliberately being set up so that you can have a voice and that your perspective and opinions can be heard. So please use that opportunity, share your voice to shape the future of nonprofit financial reporting so that it works for you. So if you want to stay engaged, which I hope you do, please visit the website. You can subscribe from the landing page on the website. You can subscribe to the monthly newsletter. There's a IFR4NPO LinkedIn page. You can join the conversation on different topics there. Follow us on Twitter, register for events and read our blogs. So I think we might be out of time for questions, but Khalaf, I'll let you wrap up if you're there, please. I'll stop sharing.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I have a little bit problem with. I'm here now, and please feel free if you have comment and keep in touch. If you have any comment, I'm ready for hear everyone from Syria, from other countries. Any questions, any comments, any?
Okay, I'll stop there. So Khalaf, thank you so much for hosting this meeting. Thank you for all your efforts in helping us put this together. Khalaf's contact details are on the website under Country Champions. Do feel free to reach out to him. My contacts are also there, and it's been a real privilege to meet you all, and I very much look forward to staying in touch. You'll be getting an email from us with the presentation and the recording if you missed anything. So thank you so much, everybody. We'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you for everyone.
Thank you.